record this. All right, now that we have that going, um, all right, so we had a lot of guesses this evening for B. That was the most popular, and let's take a look at what the answer might be. Oh, I guess I didn't do an answer slide. Oh, silly me. Oh, well, the answer is 424. That is a very large number. Amazing. Andrea will be talking about that a little bit later as we get started. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're going to be covering a preview of what we're looking forward to and what's already happening as we're getting started
Right.
here. So just a few housekeeping things, and then I'll turn it over to Andrea. Our session's being recorded. We ask that you stay muted for the duration of the webinar to just help cut back on any background noise, and that we have your cameras off also just to help not have distractions, as well as we've found that it can help with the bandwidth for the type of meeting that we're having, so we don't have to worry about that. We do have a chat box going. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to put those questions in there. We'll do the best we can to answer them. If we see something along the way that makes sense to answer as we're going, we'll try to do that, but we may just save all the questions for the end and do our best to get to all of those. After the webinar, we will send you an evaluation to see what went well, if anything didn't go well, if you have any suggestions for future webinars. That's what I always like to look forward to seeing what you guys have ideas for in the future. And we're your hosts this evening. I'm Erin Mastine, the Outreach Manager. We have Sam Parkman, the Community Engagement Coordinator, who's working closely with Andrea these days. And of course, Andrea LaMoreaux, our President and Policy Advocate. And with that, I will turn it over. Let me stop sharing my
Okay.
screen.
All right. I'm almost there here. Screen sharing and now present. All right, Erin, how does that look?
Looks good.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Erin, for that nice introduction. And thank you to all of you who tuned in this evening. I'm excited to let you know what's going on in the legislature, what's happening, what's already happened, what's going to happen. What I want to do is give you all a very brief overview of how the legislative process works here in New Hampshire. And if Erin, if I can really get into the details here. So Erin, if I'm taking too long, let me know because I know we all want to get to hearing about those priority bills that are in the legislature, what's already happened with them and what you all can do. It's been actually, Sam knows, it's been a super busy week already in the legislature with a hearing today, 5 or 6 hearings tomorrow, Sam, and then a couple more on Friday, all relative to lakes. So, I should also mention, and I think Erin did say this, this is recorded. So, and you'll get the slides or access to the slides if you want afterwards. There's a lot of information on a lot of these slides. I will hit the high points, but again, you will have this as a resource if you want to kind of dig down deeper into some of the topics. So here we are. Here we go. Buckle up. Like, okay, so the New Hampshire legislature, as Erin said, we have the largest legislative body here in the US. Actually, we have, I am told, the third largest legislative body in the English-speaking world.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. Really cool. If you want to serve, you probably can, or you probably know or have easy access to someone from your community who is serving. So it truly is a citizen legislature. Legislators are elected and serve for 2-year terms. Obviously, we just had a big election this past November. Our legislative sessions are a biennium. They're a 2-year session. The first year of this session is lots of policy stuff, but more importantly, a lot of work is being done on the state budget. You've probably heard in the news, our new governor, Ayotte, one of her first tasks will be presenting a budget to the legislature in February. So a lot of work will be done this year on budgetary things. So, who is serving in the legislature? As I mentioned, we had some elections in November. We've got a lot of new folks serving in the legislature this session, and a lot of folks that have served in the legislature for years, but maybe serving, in a different chamber. So right now, out of those 400 representatives, we have about 221 Republicans, 177 Democrats. When I initially got these facts, statistics, we also had one independent and one vacancy. I'm not sure if that's changed, but the general overview here is the House is dominated by Republicans. The Senate also dominated by Republicans. And they have a supermajority. We are, of course, a nonpartisan organization, and we will work with um, any legislator, no matter their party. And we have a history of working in a bipartisan way with both Republicans and Democrats to advance a lake-friendly policy. So during this session, about 100, I'm told 1,155 bills will be considered. If you're wondering, yes, that's a lot. This is a great, so how does the legislative process work? Erin, I bet you've been wondering this.
Yes.
Sam is learning, and every day she learns something new, I think. So this is a really kind of fun graphic from our friends over at New Futures and another advocacy group here in New Hampshire. This is for reference. I'm not going to go through this piece by piece, but a really nice uh, sort of graphic of how it works. And actually, we are going to go through the steps a little bit, and you'll see this graphic at the end. It might make a little bit more sense then. But the cool thing here in New Hampshire is if you know a representative or a senator, you can work with them to have them sponsor a bill. In the fall, what happens is legislators submit ideas for bills, and their constituents work with them. We work with legislators to create bills for lake management and protection. So later on in the fall or in December or even sometimes in January, that idea for a bill then actually becomes a bill with written text, a narrative. And there are attorneys, staff attorneys, and policy folks over that work at the legislature that take the ideas and help the representatives and senators make them into actual bills. The bill then gets a number. If it's a bill that started out with a representative in the House, it gets a number that starts with an HB, House bill. Or if it's a senator who introduced the bill, they get an SB, Senate bill, and then a number. And along the way, I'm showing you various pictures of our various state office buildings, some really neat architecture down in Concord. If you've never been to a hearing, I do encourage you to come down and check out the process, but also check out the really, really cool buildings, a lot of architectural history as well. So this is the legislative office building. I sometimes get a little lost in here, but I just think it's a really interesting architectural piece.
Some interesting history and art in these buildings as well.
Oh, absolutely. That's a very good point. Okay, so once a bill gets text, it gets assigned a committee. This happens usually. We find out, Sam and I started finding out at the beginning of January what bills were going to be heard by what committee. The House, again, that larger body with 400 folks, has more committees, 26 committees that are various different subject matter. And I've showed you a picture here of what a House hearing looks like. You will notice that I've found about 20 or so representatives are on a House committee, so definitely a bigger size compared to the Senate then. Senate has about 13 or so standing committees. Those committees kind of fluctuate from session to session based on various things, but Senate has fewer committees and there are fewer senators, again, 24, so they have fewer folks on their committees. Every bill, this is pretty unique. Every bill gets a hearing in New Hampshire. So all approximately 1,155, I think. But Erin, I think I said that's how many bills were going to be heard.
Yeah.
Big number. Anyway, that's very cool. Some of you may have been hearing that I believe the House was trying to maybe change some rules that they operate by and not and have a process for determining that some bills didn't need a hearing. I am um, I am personally happy to report that that did not happen. Every bill still in the House still gets a hearing, and I think that that's just, again, my personal opinion. The democratic process and what makes us unique here in New Hampshire is if you have an idea, if you have a House representative that will bring it to the legislature, you're going to get your day on the stage to talk about your bill. Sam and I usually find out a couple of days, sometimes more, about when a hearing is coming up. And I would say that maybe that was last Thursday. Sam and I found out that we had 9 hearings this week. So we've had a busy couple of days. So hearings, you can go in person, you can watch online in real time, or you can tune into the recording after the fact. And at some point in this presentation or as a follow-up, we'll make sure that you understand where to watch online and where to watch those recordings. They make it very, very accessible. So a committee is going to, the person who submitted the bill is going to present the bill to the committee, and then people will get up and testify for that bill, either for or against. And then that committee will discuss at some point, maybe not that day at the hearing, but at some point they will discuss the bill and they will come up with a recommendation. And they have a lot of different things they can recommend for a bill. And I won't go through all the nuances of this, but essentially they can pass a bill or say, hey, this is not a great bill. It shouldn't pass, or maybe it needs some work. So they have some options. And then sometimes if bills have economic impacts or a cost to them, then they may have to go to a finance committee, for example, to get the monies talked about as well. But basically, the committee is going to hear a bill, they're going to discuss, and then they're going to make a recommendation. And whatever recommendation they make, say that we're in the House here, then that full bill is going to go to the full House, all 400 folks, for a vote or for discussion. And vice versa, if a bill starts in the Senate, the committee makes a recommendation, the committee then makes a recommendation to the full Senate, and then the full Senate will discuss that bill. And that's where some pretty interesting debates can happen. And then the full body is going to vote on the final, their recommendation for that bill. There's some nuances here, but I'm just hitting the high points here. If that bill passes the original body that it was introduced in, then it's going to pass over to the other body. So if a bill started in the House and got approved, recommended to pass by the committee, then got recommended by the full House to pass, then it's going to cross over to the Senate. This usually happens in March or April, so a couple months from now or so. And that bill then, when it crosses over from the House to the Senate or the Senate to the House, it's going to get assigned a committee in that other body. And then essentially the same process is going to happen. I will say at this point that the second body will have fewer bills to be heard because some bills aren't going to cross over. They're not going to pass over. So a little bit of a shorter time turnaround there. Yeah, so same process. And then in the second body, if the bill passes, but say the House passed a bill and then the Senate got it, they said this is a good idea, but it needs some changes, and they pass it but amend it, then that bill is going to have to go back to the House so that the House can see if they agree with the changes. And they can agree with the changes, or then if they don't agree, then they can meet and try to iron out the differences. And again, this is a high elevation overview, but I think it's really cool that how many times a bill can be worked on to become, a really good bill. Oftentimes, bills when they're first introduced, they're good ideas, but they're not quite written in the best way, or they didn't think of all the conditions. So there's, I say if you see a bill and when it's first introduced, say in January to the House, and you like the idea of the bill, but you don't really like how it's written or exactly what it's doing, work to help get that bill amended. It's very infrequent. I have found that a bill is introduced right off the bat and it's perfect. Usually a bill takes some review and tweaking to get to be a really good bill. Um, so, if a bill passes both bodies, they both agree on the same version of a bill, and it passes the House and the Senate, then it goes to the governor. The governor then has some choices. And again, just a high elevation, the governor can sign the bill into law. The governor can allow the bill to become law without their signature, or they can veto the bill. To veto a bill, oh, and then a bill that's vetoed, so the governor says this isn't a good bill, I'm not going to sign it into law. That bill can go back and the legislature can override a veto if they have a two-thirds majority vote in both the House and the Senate. And some of you on this call may remember that we were in this situation back in 2024. We all worked together to get a bill passed to help basically protect our lakes from the in not I'm searching for the word here, the misapplication of fertilizers near storm drains, on frozen ground, on the ground when it's raining or about to rain. We got that bill, and fertilizer, of course, is a lake concern because it contains phosphorus, and extra phosphorus in our lakes can cause all sorts of water quality problems. So we all worked together with the legislature, with the House and the Senate to approve that bill and pass it. The governor got it and had some concerns with it and ended up not signing it and vetoed it. But together, our advocacy, we got our legislators to override that veto. And so that bill did become law beginning of this year. But you will hear in a few minutes that that bill maybe wasn't perfect, and there's some attempts to sort of tweak that a little bit. So, Erin,
Yes.
how was that for time?
That was really good. I'm impressed. You covered a lot.
And here again is that graphic from our friends over at New Futures, and that green arrow that just came in is where are we in the process right now? We are really at the beginning of the process. We are at the public hearing stage of the process. We are following some bills that have been introduced in the House and in the Senate that are either lake friendly or not lake friendly. And we are already testifying and we're writing testimony letters, and we've already issued a couple advocacy alerts to help get motivate our supporters, our community, to share their voices, their positions on the bill with their legislators. So I'm going to take a sip of
So,
water.
well, that was an excellent overview. Well done. But I know a lot of people are curious what's in store this year and what they can do to get involved. So, what's in store for our lakes this session?
I am glad you asked, Erin. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, for those of you who know New Hampshire lakes, you know what our generally what our core priorities are, and am assuming that we share some similar priorities here. For those of you who are new, uh, we focus on issues in the legislature having to do with the prevention and management of aquatic invasive species. Of course, aquatic invasive species can impact the ecology of our lake in negative ways and can impact our enjoyment and safety of those of our lakes. We advocate and weigh in on bills and issues related to the shoreland and wetland protection. So basically, protecting and managing the landscape in the, sort of the immediate surrounding the lake. What happens on the landscape is going to affect what flows into the lake. So we weigh in on bills that may affect how healthy and intact that shoreland and those wetland areas are, or if there's a bill that might be proposing to impact that in a negative way, we'd weigh in on it. Other core issue, we weigh in on bills that have to do with the restoration or the improvement of water quality and the protection of water quality. This picture here on the right is a picture of a cyanobacteria bloom off of a dock. If there's anyone on the call today that is not aware of cyanobacteria, congratulations. That means that it hasn't come to a community near you, which is good. But I would say it's time for you to learn about cyanobacteria because we think that it's a threat to all of our lake communities. Cyanobacteria is it acts like an algae, but it is a bacteria and it can be toxic. And when toxic, if someone swims in it or a pet swims in it, and you accidentally ingest it or it touches your skin, it make you sick. Um, the long-term exposure to a cyanobacteria, so living around a lake that continuously blooms with cyanobacteria, can cause some chronic health effects that are pretty serious. So we advocate and work also in our on-the-ground conservation programs to help protect our lakes from cyanobacteria and to help remediate or sort of address cyanobacteria blooms once they're in a lake. So those are our core priorities. I will say though that there are some other issues that are related to lake health generally and health and safety and recreation on lakes that we will weigh in to an extent as well. But these are really our primary core issues here. Okay, so about 20 minutes in here, I'm getting into the nitty-gritty now. I think I'm going to go over about 6 bills that we've deemed along with, so the New Hampshire Lakes, we have a public policy and advocacy committee, a group of board members who have experience in public policy and advocacy who are interested in this. And we sit down and talk about, we took a look, Sam and I looked at almost all the bills that were introduced into the legislature this year and sort of sorted out which ones would be directly related to our core priorities, which ones are kind of related. And we have this, and I'll give you the link later. Sam has been keeping track of this very huge tracking list. I don't even know how many bills are on it total, maybe 40, 45. But from those bills, we've come up with about 9 that we're going to spend a good amount of effort on, and then 6 or so that we're going to spend a lot of effort on. And so I'm going to go over those 6 this evening, but of course, give you the link to that tracking matrix where you can see all of the bills. So this bill, House Bill HB 105, creating a Love New Hampshire Lakes license plate. This actually had a hearing today, today at 10 a.m. Sam and I and Bria, our director of programs, were there, along with some state folks from DES. Representative Rosemary Wrong was the sponsor to introduce this bill. And this bill seeks to create a license plate that would feature a loon on a lake and be available at the cost of $30 per year. The proceeds from this license plate would be directed to the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Loan and Grant Fund. This was a fund that we're very grateful that the legislature created this fund back during the 2023 legislative session, basically to provide community groups and water suppliers, lake associations with grants or loans so that they can do projects on the landscape to reduce the pollution, essentially feeding these cyanobacteria blooms, the increasing cyanobacteria blooms in our lakes that are creating these public health issues and lowering property values and negatively impacting tourism and our economy. When that Cyanobacteria Mitigation Loan and Grant Fund was established, it was funded with, I believe, $1 million, and then another $500,000 was added to it from federal funding. But today, and we just heard in testimony today from our state agency partners, that there is $200,000 left in that fund. So this license plate would direct funding into that fund to help get out more grants and loans. We think that this is an excellent an innovative way to come up with some sort of sustainable funding source for this fund. It may not be enough, but it's a step in the right direction. And also, we're really excited about having a plate like this really to celebrate our lake heritage here in New Hampshire and also to raise awareness about our lakes. We would, of course, if this bill passes, we would be doing a public outreach campaign and really that we can use that to piggyback on, why it's so important to get the plate and what people can do to help restore and preserve our lakes. At the hearing today, there was a couple state representatives who spoke in favor of it. The Department of Environmental Services doesn't normally speak for or against a bill, but they talked on the bill and clarifying, why cyanobacteria is a problem. We spoke in favor of the bill. A representative from the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, talked about how it's pretty easy for the department to create a new license plate, so they weren't necessarily concerned about it being too much work. So we are feeling optimistic we're just at the beginning here, but we'll keep you all posted on that. And if you think you would buy a Love New Hampshire Lakes license plate, feel free to give a little thumbs up or a wave in your chat box there. You're not required to, but what I've been finding is people are pretty excited about this. There is some concern. I've heard from some folks, oh, is this going to compete with the Moose Plate license plate? That is a terrific program, and we certainly don't want to undermine that program. That program has brought in a great deal of money over a number of years to do some really good work. The problem is that that plate does not fund the Department of Environmental Services, does not help with our lakes necessarily, and doesn't help with cyanobacteria. Sam and I did some surveys of our community, and we found that those in our community who do have a moose plate are going to want to keep that moose plate, but they want to get this second plate for their second car. So we're optimistic this won't take much business away from moose plate, and at the end of the day, will bring more people into the fold of supporting conservation in general here in New Hampshire through license plates. So that's that one. Erin, do you have any questions? Did I miss anything? I'm gonna
I
take a
don't
drink
think
here.
so. Well, maybe I should know the answer to this, but is the survey still open or no? Was that before?
Yes, the survey is still open, and maybe if Sam
Wait,
is available, she can pop the link in the chat, and we can include it in one of our upcoming publications as well. But great question. And thank you to those who have filled out to the survey. And thank you to those of you. There were 145 people that signed in online in support of this bill. And I made sure to mention that at the hearing today. And sign in, that's a big sign in number. And that definitely makes an impact.
and before we go on, I just want to clarify the survey that we're talking about is just a very, very quick survey where you can just let us know if this is a license plate that you would be interested in purchasing, should it become available. And then that way we have some numbers to provide for things like hearings and whatnot.
Yeah, Sam did a great job with the survey. It's a real quick 5 minutes max, and it gives us some valuable data. So, all right. Next bill, let's see here. Okay.
This is the
This,
one you talked about earlier.
oh, yes, it is. Thank you. House Bill 291. Um, this bill has a hearing this Friday. This bill, I talked about how together we overrode the governor's veto last year on a bill that basically would help protect our lakes from fertilizer pollution. The way we understand this bill, and we agree with part of it, and this is an interesting example of and how we can disagree with a bill or oppose a bill, but ask that it be tweaked or changed so that it can be a good bill. And so this bill, the way it's written, the way we understand it, would if someone incorrectly applied fertilizer, um, right now it's possible, not likely, but possible that the Department of New Hampshire Department of Agriculture could issue a criminal penalty on them, maybe even like a misdemeanor or a felony. And that seems a little extreme. And so we support the intent to downgrade infractions of this law from a criminal penalty to a violation. A violation is less severe, won't go on your criminal record. However, we disagree with the part of the bill that says that it would remove fines, so financial penalties. We feel in general that fines serve as an important deterrent for people of doing the wrong thing. Um, and we're comfortable. Um, we would like the bill to be amended so that take away the criminal penalty, but don't take away the potential for fines. We're comfortable with this approach because, like all state agencies, the Department of Agriculture, New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, who's responsible for enforcing this bill, and I was just at a presentation. I chair the Lakes Management Advisory Committee, and last week, a representative from the Department of Agriculture was explaining how they've been implementing this law, and they explained that if they find someone applying fertilizer incorrectly, they're going to do education first. They're going to, hey, maybe you don't know about this. Well, let's explain to you, why the correct application of this and why you don't want to do it incorrectly. And they're going to do an educational approach. We've been assured that, fining is the last thing they want to do, but it's an important tool in the toolbox. If they find someone who's continually, violating something, after time, they may impose fines, but they would have some discretion on how big of a fine and when that fine would be issued. So again, we think that it's fines are an important deterrent to violations of water quality, and so we oppose this bill as it's written, but we will be requesting that it be amended to allow the department the possibility of fines. That was kind of a difficult one to explain. I hope that made sense. Erin, any questions on that one?
Well, we did have Anne just typed in the chat box. Curious, where do the funds from the fines go? Which is a good question.
That's such a good question. And I'm going to have to follow up on this, but I believe they go into the general fund, but I'm not exactly sure on that. So we'll get back to. And that's the question actually we've been asking, and they're still looking for an answer on. So maybe Sam and I can look a little harder and get back to the group on that.
Before we move to the next bill, I'm going to go back actually, because we had a question
Okay.
about the license plate. And
Okay.
Diane is wondering if the whole $30 goes into that cyanobacteria mitigation fund.
That's another great question. So my understanding, I know somewhat of an answer to this. I believe the first year that you would get the plate, you would pay a $38, and that's for the getting the plate for the first time. My understanding, and Sam, we heard this in the testimony today, there is some initial startup costs for the department to set up the new software and set up the new dies and tools to make this license plate. So that could cost up to $25,000. But so initially, um, one scenario would be that the sales would sort of replenish the upfront costs, and then after that, the majority, I don't know precisely, but the bulk of the $30 would go directly to the Cyanobacteria Mitigation and Loan and Grant Fund out into grants and loans.
Great. That's all I have for now.
All right, moving on. Okay. This is a bill that's up tomorrow at 10 a.m. This bill is a bill that came back from last year. So that's sort of something else that's neat. If a bill doesn't get passed during a biennium, there is a possibility for it to show up in the next biennium. So the next 2-year session. So this is a bill that is almost exactly like a bill last session. And this bill last session almost passed the House. There were a bunch of tie votes. It just didn't quite have enough. So this bill, HB 332, allows for the establishment of a village district to basically protect and improve lake health. So some of you on this call may be familiar with a village district. A village district is a special form of single purpose government here in New Hampshire. It's like a town government, but it is formed solely for a particular purpose. And there are like 15 or 16 reasons why a village district can be formed. And some of you may be familiar with they can be formed for um, the impoundment of water, so the operation and maintenance of a dam, for recreation, for management of beaches, for ambulance services. We are requesting that another use be added so that a village district can be formed for basically to protect and improve lake health. The beauty of this is that some of you on this call your favorite lake may be surrounded by, more than one municipality. And this bill it's enabling legislation would allow municipalities to by vote to voluntarily form a village district. So define an area around that entire lake. Maybe it's 200, the shoreland area, the 250 feet, or maybe it's a half mile around the lake or something. Define an area in which this is going to be the village district for protecting lake health. And that area would cross municipal boundaries. And so cross towns. And in that village district, there would be a special government just for managing and protecting lake health. And we think this is a good idea because, say Lake Winnipesaukee down here in the corner, I don't even know how 8 or 10 municipalities or so surround that lake. And to have an area in which, the around the lake in which those municipalities are all in one governmental unit, it's going to be a much more efficient and effective way to encourage lake-friendly management of the landscape, to potentially have consistent ordinances or setbacks or requirements or way how you apply fertilizer or how often you get your septic system pumped or something, having that consistent around the whole lake. If we have consistent management, um, first of all, it'll reduce confusion between residents. I know, Aaron, you're from the Lakes region, and I know around Winnipesaukee, there's all different, from town to town, the setbacks and the programs are different. And it's got to
Mhm.
be confusing for someone who lives on Winnipesaukee, I would think.
Sure.
Um, and so we think that this could, reduce confusion, be a more effective way, efficient way of protecting the lake, would really take the burden off of individual town governments who, maybe don't have the expertise for lake management or the bandwidth or the resources. So we're and also the residents that live in that village district, this village district could get grants or they could have special education programs and provide special technical support to people in that district and really help those people in the district learn how to live in a lake-friendly way and help protect, their investment along the lake. So we support this. We'll be testifying tomorrow in support of it. Um, so yeah, any questions or comments popping up on that one?
Yeah, we do have quite a few actually. Um,
I'll do
Su
my best.
okay. Susan is wondering, would the village district regulations supersede that of the individual towns?
They would have to be, yes. I would generally think that the village district would probably have more protective regulations just for that area around the lake. So yes,
Okay. John is wondering, would the special government around the lake have taxing authority?
they could, but they would vote. All the folks in there would have to vote to say what, powers and what things that district could do. That's my best understanding of it. So it's not guaranteed. All those people would have to vote for it.
And who would run the lake village?
Right. So those of you there, I'm certain there are people on this call that are more familiar with the village district concept than myself. I understand that village district would have commissioners that are elected, and they are, they would sort of like, how our towns, well, my town has selectmen. The village district would have commissioners that are voted, and it would be their duty and their responsibility to run that village district for that purpose.
Great. Yeah, Barry asked a very similar question about how the leaders get elected, so you
Yeah.
answered that for as well. Let's see here. Okay, Neil is has an interesting point of view. It says this will allow towns to wash their hands of any responsibility for the lake. Doesn't seem like a good idea, especially in the case of a lake with one municipality. What do you think about that
Hmm.
take?
I'm I mean I can see why that question's being asked. I'm not I think it's really this could he is right that you could form a village district in a single municipality. Um, and while I don't think the town should be completely off the hook, I would guess that in most towns, a village district dedicated to this purpose would provide a much better program and approach for managing that lake than the traditional town. But thank you for asking that question, Neil, and I can think about that more. But that's sort of my first gut response that I think the village district would probably do a better job in a more sensitive area.
Yeah,
But
so I guess I'm trying to understand, like, so just because if there is a village district, they're the ones that are then responsible for upholding,
in that area around
right?
the lake. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that area is still protected. What doesn't it doesn't matter which the town or the village district is the ones withholding those
In
standards.
that particular area, correct.
Okay, making sure I'm understanding
Yeah, no,
correctly.
but Neil, that's a great question. Thank you. I'll ponder some more on that one.
Um, Bill is asking, would the village district be able to adopt zoning regulations? And if it can adopt zoning, would it have its own planning board, ZBA, etc.?
Ooh, good question. Yes, if the village district decided that that's a power they wanted to have, yes, they could do zoning. Second part of the question, I'm not exactly sure. I don't believe the intent would then for the village district to have. That's a good question about if the village district would then have its own select, you know, planning board and whatnot. My guess is not, but they themselves could come up with subcommittees with people with expertise on those topics.
Okay, this is clearly a very hot topic with a lot
We'll
of
learn
interest
more.
in it. So before I keep going into all of these questions, I don't want to hold us up. Do we need to move on, Andrea? And can we?
Let's see what time it is. 7:40. I think we should probably move on. And
Okay,
what I would say is for this bill, HB 332, which is tomorrow. If you haven't signed in yet, please sign in and support, and you'll find out how. This is simply enabling legislation. It would allow municipalities to voluntarily do this. So I think allowing this to happen, I think, is a step in the right direction for protecting our lakes, especially our lakes that span, municipalities. And then we'll figure it out together on what is the best use and how to form this district and what are the best practices and all of that. So the first step is even allowing this to happen. And then we can work with planning experts. I am not a planning expert, to figure out the best practices for a village district for this purpose.
excellent.
All right. What else do we have? Okay. So this one, um, establishing a multi-agency task force chaired by the Department of Safety for the purpose of bringing state agencies together to identify solutions to increase the presence and patrols of enforcement, so Marine Patrol or Fish and Game officers or whatnot, on New Hampshire's waterways. So I've been in this business here in New Hampshire since 2001. And if someone asked me, what's the biggest complaint you hear from your constituency, it would be the lack of marine patrol on our lakes. And so if you feel like that, you should support this bill. Sign in before this Friday. This bill seeks to bring agencies together to come up with creative, out of the box solutions. Again, how to get more enforcement out there on our lakes. We are, of course, concerned about boating safety laws being enforced on our public waters. But also, and some of you may not think about this immediately, our enforcement folks also will enforce water quality laws out there too. If they see someone dumping a marine toilet into the water, this does happen. Not only are they out there to protect your public safety, they're out there to help protect water quality too. And so this simply is a charge to bring these agencies together to work something out, and there would be a committee and a deadline for coming up with a report and legislative action. I have heard all different reasons and barriers and challenges to why we don't have more law enforcement out there, and I'm hopeful that having a thoughtful group come together, some progress can be made because again, ever since I've been doing this, Erin, back in 2001, this has been an issue. And Erin, I know you spend a lot of time on Winnipesaukee, and I'm sure you have your own experiences in this area as well.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a big job and they're doing their best. And I know I sat in on a session at Lakes Congress last year with Captain Tim Dunleavy, and I think part of the problem is that people just aren't applying for the jobs as much as they were.
Mhm.
So I'm sure there's lots of hurdles that need to be
Absolutely.
overcome.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. I think they want to talk about hiring. Are there barriers to hiring? Um, are there ways that Fish and Game could help with patrols and vice versa, how they can, work across agencies. So if you think this is a good idea, you should be receiving another advocacy alert from me either tomorrow afternoon or first thing on Thursday. It'll give you all the specifics on how to sign in support of this one. So if there are any other questions or comments on this one,
I don't see
There's
any on the,
one quick question in the chat from Wendy Tremblay. The question is, my fear with more Marine Patrol is that they don't actually wash their boats going between lakes. They're not given funding for that. Can this be addressed when you discuss this bill and at the State House?
well, Wendy, thanks for sharing that. And if when you read the bill, you will see that this committee, this task force, there are in the legislation, they are, to speak with various stakeholder groups, and New Hampshire Lakes is listed as one of those stakeholder groups. So thank you, Wendy. That is a topic that I can make sure to raise when we get invited to talk to the task force. So thank you. All right. Well, moving on here. Um, wow, this bill's tomorrow too. So House Bill 416, prohibiting the intentional disposal of yard waste into our surface waters. So this bill would explicitly make it against the law to dispose yard waste, and yard waste is generally defined here as leaves, grass clippings, garden debris, into surface waters and provides a penalty for doing so. So again, getting into that penalties. Oh, we don't want to fine people. We want to educate people, but having the possibility of a fine, may help serve as a deterrent. We all probably on this call know that yard debris dumped into our lakes adds nutrients that can fuel the growth of unwanted plants, unwanted algae, and cyanobacteria. Again, cyanobacteria that can be toxic. Uh, right now, we do get calls fairly frequently from members of the public and our lake association partners saying, hey, yard waste dumping in our lakes is a problem. And having this law, this very explicit, well-defined law on the books and doing outreach on it, I think is going to help local community groups in particular and towns raise awareness that this is a no-no and help, again, foster that create voluntary culture of lake preservation, which is really what we're trying to create. So we support this. We urge you to support it too. Again, it's being heard tomorrow. You can sign in. Oh, this is something I haven't mentioned. Sign in online anytime until 11:59 p.m. on the day the bill is heard. It's better, though, to sign in before the bill is heard because many of those committee members do actually look at the sign-ins. So, questions or comments on this one?
let's see here. Anne is asking, why does this include a fiscal note? HB 416 FN.
That's such a great question. So sometimes whenever the folks down at the what is it? Legislative of office, something like legislative service office. I'm getting it backwards. But anyway, the folks that write the bills, sometimes they don't know if there's going to be a fiscal impact or an economic impact to a state agency. So they give the state agency um, before the bill got introduced into the legislature, an opportunity to review it. And so the state agency will comment on, oh, this bill is going to cost us money to enforce or whatnot. I don't have that in front of me right now. And I don't know if Sam has the ability to look up that fiscal note, but sometimes the state agency will say, thank you, legislative office, serve. Oh my, I still can't get it right. Anyway, Legislative Services Office. Thank you for letting us know about this bill. It doesn't have an economic impact on our agency. Or, oh, actually, this bill will make it so we have to hire 3 more people to implement this. I do not believe that this is going to have a huge impact on the agencies. But we will find out tomorrow at the hearing if a state agency is negatively impacted by this bill. We will certainly hear them at the hearing explaining that to the committee.
Okay, we have a couple other questions. Jeannie's asking, would this bill address the issue concerning streams emptying into our lakes?
Um, well, it would address them in that, you would not be able to dump leaves and grass clippings and garden debris into the streams that feed our lakes either. If that's what we're asking, I think that is the purview of this legislation.
Okay. Susan's wondering who would enforce this.
So that's a great question, and you must have ESP because at the hearing today on a different bill, um, some some of us were talking about in this bill, it says this would be enforced by peace officers. Peace officers are defined as police and I forget a couple other things. And so I believe there'll be some discussion on should this be enforced by the Department of Environmental Services? Should this be enforced by the police? Should this be enforced by the Department of Agriculture? So I think that is a discussion that I predict may come up tomorrow. So right now it says officers of the peace, and you can look in the legislation. And again, it's like sheriffs, police, police people, a couple others, but I am curious to hear from the Department of Environmental Services tomorrow to see if they think they have a role in this or if they think the wording should be changed. So great question. I was wondering that too.
Um, Laura is saying that she's on the testimony submission form and this bill is not listed, HB 416. I don't know if that's something you have a quick answer for off the top of your head, or if maybe Sam can take a peek while we're chatting. Um,
Yeah.
but it might be a troubleshooting thing that we would need to do, not during the webinar.
Yeah, I would say sometimes just if Sam can look at it, great. Sometimes I just inadvertently put in the wrong date. And then I'm like, that's usually when I can't find a bill. So I'm like, where is it? Where is it? And I'm on the completely wrong date. But occasionally there are little glitchy things. It's a really great system. It's pretty powerful, but occasionally there are some glitches. So sometimes I'll just, if I'm pretty sure I'm doing the right thing and it's still not working, I will walk away and come back like 15 minutes later. And usually whatever was happened, whether it's me or the system, the things are cleared up. Thank you for that. Yeah, and if you ever are trying to sign in on a bill and you're having problems, email me and I check my email quite frequently and I will do my best to help you from afar.
Excellent. And some people are chiming in, so I think maybe that will be helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. It takes a village.
That's right.
All right. Well, we're going to move on here just because I know you all have probably other things to do on your, I don't even know what day this is, Tuesday evening. Okay. This bill is also being heard tomorrow. This is for increasing penalties for the Shoreland Water Quality Protection Act. I am sure many of you on this call are familiar with the Shoreland Water Quality Protection Act, which seeks to protect our lakes, our rivers, our streams. So within 250 feet, it basically regulates the removal of vegetation, excavation and fill projects, the use of fertilizer, and various development activities. The fines when they act, and I learned this today at the legislature back in 1991 when this was initially established, the fines were $5,000. And so this bill seeks to allow the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services the ability so that they may raise violation from $5,000 up to $15,000 per violation. So what we're being told is that when the violations were initially, established, the fine in 1991, it has not increased since then. So one, we think that it's reasonable to allow the department to increase that violation should they choose um, to keep up with the cost of inflation. And as we've talked about earlier in a couple other bills, when a fine is sufficient to serve as a deterrent, that may encourage people to comply with the law or encourage people to not knowingly violate the act. So Again, like the Department of Agriculture, we know that the Department of Environmental Services, wants to do education, education, education first. The last thing they want to do is have to find someone and all of the stuff that goes along with that. But occasionally there are folks that, knowingly violate the Shoreline Water Quality Protection Act and don't cooperate with the department. And then that's when the department may feel that it's necessary for a fine. So we urge you to sign in and support this one. Again, a stronger Shoreline Protection Act will help to keep our lakes cleaner and healthier. So any quick questions or comments on this one?
Well, I don't know if you'll have the answer to this or not, but Susan's asking if there's evidence that fines are a deterrent.
That's a great question. And I don't, at the tip of my fingers, I don't have any like sociology, research at my fingers, but Sam and Sam is great. I'm like, hey, how about this? Maybe we can add that to our list of things. Because again, we do have a number of bills that reference fines, and it might be interesting to see what the data is out there. Erin, I know we're running out of time, so I'm gonna kind of scoot along here,
Yeah,
if that's all right.
absolutely.
So I've alluded to you all have a role to play in this, and our lakes are counting on you all. I am your hired professional lobbyist. Sam is helping support that. Bria on our team is helping support that. Our board of directors, our policy committee, our lake advocates network throughout the state. But we need you all to weigh in on these bills. You all who live around the lake, who, see a lot of this stuff up close in person every day. To see the bills that we're monitoring, again, you can go to our website. I just gave you a highlight of some of them. And Erin, I thought you might ask me, what about wake surfing this session?
Yeah, we've had quite a few people asking what's going on there.
Yeah. So I would tell everyone, again, we're running out of time here, but let's put a pin in wake surfing for this year. There is no legislation proposed this year for wake sports. Many of you on this call know it was a big year for wake sports legislation last year, and we had a big win. The big win being that we defended our lakes from getting the national boating industry's model legislation cemented into law here. We felt that their national model legislation was just not good enough for our lakes and really wasn't going to make a hill of beans of difference. But there is no wake surfing legislation being considered this year. My best explanation for that is, and I'm sure many of you have perceived this, it's become a very political issue. And it is not a favorable political environment to make any real conservation progress on that this session. Doesn't mean we're giving up. We're parking it at the boat dock for now. But in the meantime, there is some additional studies that have come out, and I know more are going to be coming out to help build our case about why increased setbacks and minimum depth requirements would be appropriate to protect our water quality. So stay tuned. And in the meantime, I am if you have a recreational conflict of any kind at your lake, I urge you to continue to try to work with your community to resolve that conflict. But again, we're not giving up on this, and we'll be back with this issue at some point in one way, shape, or form to make some real and permanent positive difference.
Great.
Okay, so wrapping up here. So
How
how,
can,
go
yeah,
ahead.
how can people give help our lakes and give them a voice in the legislature this session?
Great, thank you. I say a lot of you already have. Again, we had 150 or so folks sign in today about the license plate. First and foremost, if you're not receiving our advocacy alert e-news, sign up for it. You can go to our website at the bottom of our homepage and sign up. Again, Sam and I will be, and Erin will be helping us send one out tomorrow afternoon or first thing on Thursday morning. It's a great way to hear what's coming up, and we try to make it as easy as possible for you guys to understand what these bills mean and, line by line telling you, okay, here's how you can go support this, or here's how you can go oppose this online. And if you've ever done this, or when you get there, you'll see that the state website, the general court website, they make it as easy as possible, and then you can sign in, you can see who has signed in on various bills. There's really a lot of resources there on their website. When you get to the sign in, it's going to ask you things like your name. It's going to ask you pick the date. You need to know the date the hearing is and what committee it is and the bill number. And we try again to provide all that information very straightforward to you in our advocacy alert. You will see there is a place for you to upload a written statement or write in a few sentences. And we encourage you all to share personal stories. Our representatives want to hear from all of you again, because you're the ones who are living there around the lake. You're the ones who are seeing this, and you're the ones who can really help inform them. And consider testifying at a hearing. I testify um, but and but they really want to hear from you all, to hear from the folks again who are there and living this. And so if you want to, first and foremost, come to a hearing, just having people standing there, in support of lakes, it makes a big difference. And then if you're inclined to speak, 2 to 3 minutes, sharing your story, let me know if you want to testify and we'll strategize beforehand on talking points and sort of the rules of etiquette for the State House. There are a few to be aware of, but overall, it's not a scary place. And for the most part, most of the committees are pretty friendly and welcoming. And to wrap it up, and look at that, my clock says 8
Oh my
o'clock.
God, perfect timing.
Really, it takes a village here. Please, please, if you've never been down to the legislature, consider coming. It's a really fascinating place for so many reasons: the architecture, the artwork, the people, the committees, the bills. Um, but sign in online, share your story. Together, we will, bit by bit, provide more protection for the long-term health of our lakes, for our family, our friends, our grandkids, for our economy. So thank you. And I'll turn it back over to you, Erin.
Yeah, I just want to touch on one thing quickly. We've had a couple people who chimed in about, our notifications and how can they find out when hearings are happening. And Gloria Norcross, actually a previous employee of ours, mentioned that for bills, sometimes they're just like, surprise, there's a hearing happening tomorrow. And I know this question did come up last year as well, where we're doing our best to get those advocacy alerts out as soon as we have the information. So I didn't know if you wanted to touch a little bit on that, Andrea, about the timing and how that all works.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yes, right. Thankfully, they didn't change the rules. So we should know, when hearings are coming up, and we should know at least a few days, if not more, ahead of time. Um, so unfortunately, one of the rules was sort of changed in so that a committee hears a bill, like so for the House, they'll hear a bill and then they'll go into what's called executive session where they actually discuss it. In the past, um, it's going to be a little bit harder for us with some rule changes for us to actually understand when they're going to discuss the bill. And even when the committee discusses the bill, no one, they don't take testimony, but you can still email them and whatnot. So I would say we are committed to letting you know as soon as we can. And the other thing I will say, and maybe we can do a follow-up to this, is if there's a particular bill that you're really interested in, and you don't want to wait for us to get the information and then for us to put it into our advocacy alert, you can subscribe directly to certain bills. And maybe Sam can find the resource for that. And you can say, I want to know any time, this is on the state's website, anytime something happens with the license plate bill, I want to know about it. And you can do that. So that's what Sam and I do. We subscribe to a bunch of bills and we get almost immediate notifications when it changes status for whatever reason. But yes, there is a bit of a delay and we do our best.
Yep. Yep, we do. And I know we're all working hard. There's a lot of fast moving pieces here, this in this legislature and all
For
this.
sure, for sure.
So, But we are a few minutes over here. I mean, I think we could probably sit here and answer questions for a while tonight, but we all have things to do. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Like Andrea said, sign up for those advocacy alerts. That's the best way to stay in touch. And, if you ever need something, don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us here on this team, and we'll do our best to get you some answers. So thank you
Absolutely.
all for tuning in, and thanks for that great overview, Andrea.
And thank you, Erin, for setting this up for all of us. And good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.